One thing I'm also curious is that the long acting, it's amazing that it works so well and that it changes some of the drugs, which are basically generics, and makes them much more valuable for patients as well. I don't think I find it that obvious that it can make such a difference and deliver so much value.
No, you don't think so, but I mean, there are a number of components here. I mean, from a convenience standpoint, it's obvious that monthly injections are going to be more convenient than daily or 3 times daily or whatever. But there is also, from an efficacy perspective, that you have kind of continuous exposure at a certain level that is well defined, and you avoid
the pharmacokinetics.
Yeah,
are very much better.
and you also avoid potential tolerability issues with spikes in concentrations and so forth. And so those are important components. But for another thing is that, for instance, an opioid use disorder patient really doesn't want to be reminded of their disease. So the fact that you kind of have monthly doses makes you feel more ordinary, and you don't have to think every day on taking your medication. And I think that's this stigmatization, which is involved in many times in medications, shouldn't be underestimated. So there are
lots of drug is also
compliance is of course another very important aspect.
It's kind of also, it's a bit contradictory with the recent GLP-1 development where they don't want sub-Q and they want the pill.
I don't think that's gonna. If you're looking at areas where you had the pill, for instance, if you take we had, first of all, we had a short-acting injectable, then we had a long-acting, and then we got the twice-daily pill, which had a very difficult time getting any market shares, and now I think it never was launched in Europe. Now it's coming, a daily pill potentially has a better faith, but patients don't want to take, usually not, twice daily medication when you can get an injection every month. So I'm not sure. I think for the GLP-1 area, I'm sure there will be patients who will prefer the daily pill, but I'm sure there will be a big group of patients that would prefer weekly or monthly or whatever new modalities that come in the space.
I guess it's good if the patient.
Yeah, I mean, treatment optionalities is very important. You can individualize treatment to lifestyles and other matters.
And the sub-Q, I guess it's the same as for diabetes patients, is a pre-filled syringe, and the patient can inject themselves.
Oh, you mean our sub-Q?
Yeah, your sub-Q.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the good things with the FluidCrystal system is because it's a pure solution before it's injected, so it can be injected with relatively thin syringes and using state-of-the-art auto-injector or pen devices. So we are essentially using the same devices as you see for other recently introduced commercial products.
Okay, that's good. Let's move to the first product. I think it's the worldwide name Brixadi in the US. What's quite funny is, from the research, is that the drug itself was found in the 60s in the UK, I think. Discovered.
It's a very old molecular entity, but a very interesting compound because it's a combination of an agonist and an antagonist. So you have very positive effects on cravings and other things. On the same time, you avoid, for instance, respiratory depression, which is one big issue with opioids, where it can result in overdose and death. So it's got a very good profile from a mode of action standpoint.
Yeah. And then the actual treatment that it's for basically opioid dependent on patients to get them out of the craving.
Yeah, I mean, it's not saying a maintenance treatment of opioid use disorder, but the other point is that typically we also see that some patients, when ready, they are tapering out and going to total abstinence. So it's a continuous treatment from the early chaotic state of dependence to in some cases then patients becoming completely abstinent. But our part of the treatment is the maintenance phase, you can say.
Yeah, the maintenance. Okay. We'll talk more about the opioid crisis as well.
Yeah,
I read the Purdue Pharma book. And I was quite shocked. But we'll talk about this after. But the first on the. Because on the side, it's doing like pretty well. I think US, Europe, Australia, but I think you have quite a lot of difference in market shares from what I read. Like how come is like what's the explanation?
I think that first of all, I mean, from sales, I think we have had double-digit growth now for since launch in 2019, year by year. And fortunately, I believe that will continue because there is a high medical need in terms of market penetration.
So the global says it's around $180 million 2024.
Yeah,
it's on there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But looking at the market penetration, I think once we have established, once there is funding available for patients, which is, now in Europe, government austerity is a big issue. But in markets where we have good funding, like the Nordics, Australia, we are market leaders in almost all segments.
Okay.
So that's and we have in Finland, I think we have more than 5,000 patients. When we started treatment, I believe the patient numbers available in patients was lower than 5,000. So we've actually captured also patients out of treatment. Australia, we have something like 20,000 patients plus in treatment out of a total of 60,000. Then there are markets that are more difficult to enter, and that's often the big European markets where there is financial hurdles, so patients have difficulty getting finance, reimbursement, and so forth. Or reimbursement is not always the problem. It's sometimes it's just government funding to the treatment systems.
Okay. You mean as in like going to a clinic or something? That has to be good.
Yeah, the clinics, the budget for clinics can be limited.
Okay.
In Germany, we have a lot of resistance because doctors are reimbursed, so they're paid basically on the number of visits you have, and then that doesn't really favor a long-acting treatment. But nevertheless, I mean, our data are very strong. We showed superiority in reduction of illicit opioid use. We have shown a lot of quality of life advantages for patients with Buvidal. So I believe slowly and steadily we will continue to penetrate also the larger European markets.
Okay. And then when you say, for example, in your leading markets, you are basically replacing the generic version, the pill version, for those patients.
Mainly, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
So and what we're seeing more and more is that there is a heritage of methadone treatment.
Yeah.
Methadone has. I mean, first of all, it's much more toxic and it's very sedating. Okay. And we're seeing in the younger new patients mainly go into long-acting buprenorphine. Okay. But there is still, I think in Europe, there's a majority of patients on methadone. And we're trying to, and working, quite successfully to transfer more of the methadone patients over to buprenorphine, which is much less sedating and has several advantages also relating to the risk of overdose and respiratory depression.